John Thomson.
Yes, and we work under the names Thomson and Craighead as visual artists, and we've become involved in this project that Ellie's originated. And so we're going to spend, we've not got so much time, we've got about 20 minutes. So we're going to spend a few minutes just showing a couple of pieces of work we've made already as artists that kind of indicate some of our interest that has led us towards the project that Ellie's kind of initiated, which is really, truly a fascinating interdisciplinary kind of context to be thinking about art making for us.
Yeah, and I think the title on the timetable is called Temporary Index, and we're going to be talking about this as a kind of proposal for an artwork that we want to make, since we've been thinking about nuclear and thinking about how we can start to think about time in relation to that.
So this is a way of perhaps just showing that we, throughout our work, have an interest in time and space, I guess. And this is a very simple road sign that, if it points north or south, tells you exactly how far it is from itself. So the distance is 24,000 miles, 859 miles.
Now,
So,
unless you are a geography person,
yeah,
you're unlikely to immediately get that.
but it does say here.
It does say here, yeah.
The planet's slightly fatter than it is tall, so that's why it has to work on a longitudinal axis. As well as time and space in our work, we're also interested in networks. Particularly for us, as we left art school in the early 90s, the web, the World Wide Web, was just really appearing on the radar for all of us to be using it as societies. And so a lot of our works kind of ended up trying to consider what that kind of means for us as people and how we kind of perceive the world.
So this is a portrait of Tim Berners-Lee. And Tim Berners-Lee, I'm sure you all know, is the kind of person who is given the term of
The sort of
creating.
originator of the web and a little bit the internet.
And we were very interested, we'd never ever done a portrait of anyone before. So it was quite a strange thing to do. And we were asked to do it by the National Media Museum, which is part of the Science Museum.
So the full title of the work is A Live Portrait of Tim Berners-Lee. And it's live because it's comprised of webcams that exist in the world. So webcams that we borrowed, not ones that we put up ourselves.
So I'm going to point, because it's quite dark, but basically we're trying to draw with web cameras. So you'll see the black here is at night time, and then above we have, well, it's kind of at dawn rise, dawn set, and go back. So there we go. They're about 12 hours apart from each other. We found, and then all these squares here are made up of the webcam. So during the day, if you're going to be in the museum, Tim will invert, if you see.
Yeah. So every 60 seconds, the page, the image, the projection updates, and because the cameras are on opposite sides of the planet, the dark and the light exchanges every 12 hours as we rotate around the sun.
So I guess that's what we're meaning about being really interested in time. We were very curious to see if we could actually draw, but using the network and using the rotation of the planet.
Yeah. So again, it kind of extends this interest we have in time, in networks, and how our distributed networks interact or have a kind of place as a layer on top of physical space.
Yeah. And we call this an early warning system. So it's Tim Berners-Lee, an early warning system. And so we're really interested in just seeing, we've got this lovely idea of, the internet was a really wonderful, utopic, open idea and system, and then slowly, quite quickly now, it's disintegrating into not an open space.
This is another very simple example using webcams. Sorry, the image is a bit dark. It's called Horizon, and it's basically a clock, or a sundial, an electronic sundial. So following on from the Tim Berners-Lee piece, this is an array that shows you in kind of strip form, like kind of little movie storyboard strips, a snapshot from a camera in every time zone in the world, or rather every time zone in the world where we could find a camera. The Pacific Ocean's tricky. So what happens is the work updates across every 10 minutes or so, the entire projection itself, if you look at it there, updates from top left to bottom right to act as this kind of sundial. So you always see a kind of snapshot of time horizontally, but again, as we go around the planet, day and night comes through vertically on it. So it's just a sort of ongoing, quite ambient artwork that lets you see time, see the world's time, almost as a kind of doorway.
And I think for us it's about seeing time, so you can see sunset, sunrise happening within one screen. And you get a kind of re-visioning of the world, of the whole world, but in a very different way than we're kind of usually get represented.
So that's just a tiny snapshot of things that were kind of interesting us anyway as artists, which sort of leads us on more now to what we're doing and what we're trying to think about in this kind of wide project that Ellie has originated. So what we did is last summer we went to Drigg, which is the location of a low-level waste site next to Sellafield. So this image, it was a beautiful summer's day when we went, is actually looking across to Sellafield from Drigg, or from the dunes just in front of Drigg.
And it's a really beautiful landscape. It's an incredible landscape. And I think when we were there, and the whole time we were in that whole area, you just became very aware of the landscape and of nature. And I think that's something that you can see through the photographs that becomes increasingly interesting.
Is this an image that Eddie took?
No, I don't think you did. She did.
Oh no, actually.
I mean, this is the whole thing for us. We are very new into thinking about nuclear. So we were going round. So we arrived, and for instance, we forgot. Since we're not really nuclear trained up people, we wore sandals. Now, that was obviously a straightaway error, wasn't it? So basically, we arrived at a low-level nuclear storage in my Birkenstocks, which I think are really sensible footwear, but not in that particular situation. And the same with taking photographs. We actually had someone with us who we had to describe what we wanted, and then they would photograph for us. And then these photos, which you're seeing, and what also they were in Ellie's presentation, then were checked before we were then given them back.
They were actually, can you remember, they were taken on our behalf actually, weren't
yes.
they? We said, look, there's a boat, could you take a picture? And the guy that taught us took the picture.
Yes. So you did describe, and that's really, I mean, that is actually quite strange and quite interesting experience.
Well, there's a lot of security around these sites. Drigg, I think, and if people know better, please correct us on our factual inaccuracies, but I think it's the oldest storage site in England.
Well, yeah, that's what, from my memory, that's and from the website.
From products from nuclear industry, and Windscale, of course, was a sort of military research reactor as well as a domestic energy.
Now, I might be wrong, but I think it was 1959 when it opened up. This is from doing a little bit of research. And so it is now the oldest. So although we were going around to low level, it's very interesting that because it's the earliest one in Britain, they're not 100% sure that everything there is stored as low level. And that's really about us learning about the nuclear industry. People didn't know how to dispose of it to begin with.
And I think that's one of the big problems that Drigg has as a site, is that it does have this kind of legacy where, to begin with, what we were told was people were bringing waste from Sellafield, what used to be Windscale, and they're actually driving it in trucks and tipping it into open trenches. So the very early vaults, as they seem to be called, are actually that people aren't quite sure what's in them. So it does raise the question in terms of it as a low-level waste site, how long this site needs to be managed and maintained and looked over before the half-lives and the daughter products of the isotopes become safe for us, I guess. Which, as Shelley has said, is a sort of speculative level anyway. So it seems to us to be a very complicated subject.
And I guess coming in as a novice as well, I guess I haven't considered it properly, but I was surprised that this was actually a private company looking after nuclear waste as well. And that's something that I guess is obvious to people involved in the area, but for us that was interesting. So you are asking, how long this contract is for, and then what happens at the end of that contract, and if there is a problem, who do you call? And and just looking at those systems.
Yeah, there are some. The standard of storage has improved dramatically over the life of the site, as far as we can tell, and the way it's being stored currently is in these big concrete kinds of containers, and then containers that you can see here. These are older ones that are corroding a bit, but that are put in big kind of arrays and then sealed over the top with, I think they call it a bio-exclusion layer, which is actually just rocks, and then it's landscaped on top of that. But the thing that struck both of us when we visited this site was this issue of time and how you can actually deal with time. And so we started to try and develop a work that we've called a temporary index, where we would quite like to make little abstracted numeric totems that perhaps can mark sites, so that they could perhaps mark items of waste, or they could mark a site itself, and could exist as an array of information. So it's the sort of thing that could exist online as just a sort of numeric, almost decorative kind of database, but obviously with information in it. And then in this rather grandiose kind of visualization as a sort of totem that could be counting down time. But of course, when does it count down to, and when would the zero be the point you would want to identify? And that's something that we need to research a lot more, because half-lives and the way in which nuclear waste kind of decays is itself a sort of something you can speculate on, but it's a sort of predictive art, I think.
And I think that for us, getting our heads round some of the big issues are really about. I think it's really interesting, with Shelley saying that her training was in physics and archaeology, and I personally have a really hard time seeing time in longer than my lifetime. So I can think about time up till I'm about 80, 90, but beyond my lifetime I find it quite hard. And I think that that's one of the things that is incredibly strange about thinking about 100,000 years, or having waste that will take longer, that has a life that is longer than actually as humans we've been alive and on this planet. And that's quite an extreme, for me, I really struggle, and I find that quite, to see and think about numbers or time in that scale. And I think that's what we're trying to do now with these markers. So maybe we're not thinking about having works that are around in 100,000 years. We're actually maybe trying to make people more aware of now.
I guess we want to be pushing information into culture, as has been stated in the introduction today. And so one of the effects, I think, sometimes, especially when we spoke to nuclear semioticians, who are these people that go, what if we have a big sign above the geological store and it makes people really want to break into it, or they have these sort of discussions that can become quite esoteric, actually. And I think they're fascinating, and I think they're relevant to have. But we want to do the opposite in a funny sort of way. We want to maybe think about now as being the time that information is present, and that we as cultures can be marking that time and reminding ourselves that it's not a problem for 10,000 years' time. It's a thing we have to deal with every day. And that's why we're kind of interested to have these things which are constant, changing, but kind of solid and persistent. Of course, technologically, that's not the case. So the information itself has to be transferred in the future, just as we have to look after the storage sites as well. I mean, Drigg, to go back to Drigg, it has a plan, we were told, that looks about 100 years in the future. But the guy that showed us around said, for example, that in 1,000 years' time they think the site will probably fall into the sea. So there are lots of very big questions that we have to deal with, and we have to be dealing with all of the time. And so to make this kind of decorative array of information seems like a pertinent thing to do alongside all the other activities that are taking place for us to try and look after waste in the world, nuclear waste. We're only a few minutes over. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.